The impossible prisoner. The first thing Dr. Elena Vasquez noticed when consciousness returned was the perfect temperature. Not too warm, not too cold, but precisely calibrated for human comfort. That attention to detail told her everything she needed to know about her captors. They were thorough, methodical, and they had studied humanity extensively. Unfortunately for them, they had only studied the data, not the reality. Elena kept her breathing steady and her eyes closed while she assessed her situation. The surface beneath her was smooth metal, slightly curved. A containment pod, most likely. The air carried the metallic taste of recycled atmosphere mixed with something organic. Reptilian, her enhanced senses told her. The Saurian hegemony had finally decided to make direct contact with humanity, and they had chosen her as their introduction. She almost smiled at the irony. Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenobiologist and former Alliance military engineer, had spent 15 years studying alien psychology and behavior. Now she would have the opportunity to apply that knowledge from the inside of their prison. "Subject is regaining consciousness," a voice hissed in accented standard. "Shall we begin the interrogation protocols, Warden?" "Patience, Technician Zix," came the reply in a deeper, more measured tone. "Dr. Vasquez is not like the pirates and smugglers we usually process. According to our intelligence, she holds 3 advanced degrees in xenobiology, 2 in engineering, and served as a tactical advisor during the Proxima incident. She is dangerous because she thinks." Elena allowed herself to stir naturally, blinking, as artificial lights gradually increased in intensity. The cell around her was impressive in its simplicity. Smooth walls that seemed to be cut from a single piece of dark metal, no visible seams or joints. The ceiling was perhaps 3 meters high with subtle indentations that suggested hidden sensors and defense systems. Even the air circulation was nearly silent, indicating sophisticated environmental controls. Through the transparent barrier at the front of her cell, she could see 2 figures. The larger was clearly Saurian, standing nearly 2.5 meters, tall with deep green scales and intelligent golden eyes. His uniform was pristine, decorated with symbols of rank that Elena recognized from intercepted communications. This would be Warden Kethvar, the architect of Kepler Station's legendary security systems. Beside him stood a creature she had only seen in classified Alliance files. Vorthak, insectoid, with compound eyes that missed nothing, and 4 arms that moved in perfect coordination. The technician's carapace was a mottled brown color, and Elena could see the subtle ridges that indicated enhanced cybernetic implants. An analyst, then, probably responsible for prisoner evaluation and threat assessment. "Dr. Vasquez," the warden spoke, his voice carrying the formal tone of someone accustomed to absolute authority. "You are aboard Kepler Station, sovereign territory of the Saurian hegemony. Your vessel was detected violating our territorial boundaries while conducting unauthorized research in the Helix Nebula. Under the Galactic Accords, you are subject to our justice system." Elena sat up slowly, making no sudden movements. She had expected this conversation and had prepared for it during the months of planning that had led to this moment. "Warden Kethvar," she replied, noting the slight widening of his eyes at her use of his name. "I appreciate the comfortable accommodations. Temperature is perfect. Atmosphere mixture is spot on, and I have to compliment your medical team. The neural dampeners you used during my capture were very sophisticated. Barely caused a headache." Technician Zix's compound eyes flickered rapidly, a sign of agitation Elena had learned from her studies. She should not know the warden's identity. Security protocols require all prisoner interactions to be conducted through anonymous interfaces. Should not know many things, apparently, Elena agreed cheerfully. "But here we are. Now I assume you have questions about my research mission. I'm happy to cooperate within the bounds of scientific ethics." Warden Kethvar activated a control panel, and Elena felt the subtle shift in air pressure that indicated additional security measures coming online. "Dr. Vasquez, your cooperation is not optional. This facility has contained some of the most dangerous individuals in known space. Pirates who have destroyed entire colonies, war criminals who have committed genocide, terrorists who have wielded weapons of mass destruction. None have ever escaped. None have ever resisted our interrogation procedures. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Impressive track record. Though I have to ask, how many of those prisoners were human? The question hung in the air between them. Elena could see the warden processing the implications while technician Zix consulted data streams on his portable interface. The answer, Elena knew, was 0. Humanity was still relatively new to the galactic community, and first contact protocols had prevented situations like this until now. Species identification is irrelevant, the warden finally replied. Biology may vary, but the principles of containment remain constant. Physical barriers, energy fields, chemical restraints, and psychological pressure. These methods work regardless of evolutionary origin. Elena stood and walked to the transparent barrier, placing her palm against its surface. The material was warm to the touch, indicating an active energy field rather than simple transparent metal. Impressive engineering, but she could already see 3 potential weaknesses in its design. You know, Warden, I spent 10 years studying alien containment systems as part of my military service. The theory behind your setup is solid. Classical approach, really. But you are operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about human psychology. Enlighten us. Technician Zix interjected, his cybernetic implants whirring softly as he recorded everything. Elena smiled, and both aliens took an involuntary step backward. She had noticed this reaction before when dealing with non-human species. The human smile, intended as a friendly gesture, often registered as a threat display to species that had evolved different social cues. She filed that information away for later use. Most species develop their survival strategies based on their environment of origin, Elena explained, beginning to pace within her cell. Saurians evolved from apex predators, so your approach to problems is direct and overwhelming. You see a threat, you apply superior force until the threat is eliminated. Efficient and effective. She paused at the far wall, running her fingers along its surface. The material was smoother than glass, but she could feel microscopic vibrations that suggested active monitoring systems built into the structure itself. Humans evolved differently. We were prey animals for most of our evolutionary history. We survived not through superior strength or natural weapons, but through adaptability, problem-solving, and the ability to turn our environment into a tool. Warden Kethvar crossed his arms, a gesture that Elena recognized as skepticism. Dr. Vasquez, you are attempting to engage in psychological manipulation. I have studied human behavioral patterns extensively. Your species tends toward emotional responses when faced with hopeless situations. Bravado, false confidence, attempts to negotiate from positions of weakness. Elena laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the confined space. You've studied the data, Warden, but data doesn't tell the whole story. Let me ask you something. How long have I been unconscious? 73 standard hours, Technician Zix replied automatically, then seemed to regret providing the information. 73 hours, Elena repeated. And in that time, how many system diagnostics have been run on this cell? The warden's golden eyes narrowed. Standard protocols require diagnostics every 12 hours during containment of high-priority prisoners. So at least 6 complete system checks, Elena mused. All showing normal function, I assume. Energy barriers at full strength, atmospheric controls functioning perfectly, structural integrity at 100%. Your point, Dr. Vasquez. Elena pressed both hands against the transparent barrier and took a deep breath. My point is that your diagnostics are measuring the wrong variables. What happened next occurred so quickly that the security sensors barely registered the sequence of events. Elena pressed her palms flat against the energy barrier and pushed, not outward against its strength but sideways along its surface. The barrier was designed to resist perpendicular force, but lateral stress created harmonic vibrations in the Yo energy matrix. Those vibrations, multiplied by Elena's precisely calculated movements, created resonance patterns that interfered with the barrier's stability field. The transparent wall flickered once, twice, then failed completely. Alarms immediately began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the corridor in pulsing red illumination. while automated systems began implementing lockdown procedures. But Elena was already moving, stepping through the deactivated barrier with casual confidence. Impossible, Warden, Kethavar breathed, reaching for his emergency communicator. The energy field was operating at full capacity. No known force can disrupt a Type 7 containment barrier from the inside. When humans adapt, Admiral Torvin arrived on Kepler Station 6 hours after Dr. Elena Vasquez disappeared into the maintenance tunnels. The massive Saurian military commander stood nearly 3 meters tall, his crimson scales bearing the scars of decades of combat. He had crushed rebellions on 12 worlds and commanded fleets that had brought entire star systems to heel. He was not accustomed to being summoned to deal with a single escaped prisoner. "Report," he demanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. Warden Kethavar stood at attention, though his usually perfect posture showed signs of strain. "Admiral, the prisoner has been missing for 6 hours and 17 minutes. We have sealed all primary access routes and deployed hunter-killer drones throughout the station. However, she appears to be moving through areas we assumed were inaccessible to biological entities." "Assumed," Admiral Torvin repeated, the word carrying enough menace to make several technicians step backward. "You assumed that a human could not survive in near-vacuum conditions. You assumed that she could not navigate maintenance tunnels designed for automated systems. You assumed that your containment protocols were adequate for a species you have never actually contained before." Technician Zix approached carefully, his forearms clutching data tablets and sensor readings. "Admiral, we have been monitoring atmospheric conditions throughout the affected areas. The maintenance sections where she is moving have pressure levels less than 5% of standard atmosphere. The temperature fluctuates between freezing and 50 degrees above standard. No known species can survive those conditions without life support equipment." Admiral Torvin examined the data, his golden eyes scanning environmental readings that should have represented certain death for any biological entity. "And yet she not only survives, but appears to be thriving. What do we know about human physiological capabilities?" "Our intelligence suggests they are a relatively fragile species," the warden replied, pulling up holographic displays of human anatomy. "Lower bone density than most spacefaring races, limited natural weapons, inadequate natural armor. Their home world is barely habitable by galactic standards. High gravity, corrosive atmosphere, dangerous levels of radiation from their star. Their disadvantages," Admiral Torvin said slowly, "or their advantages. Think, Warden. A species that evolved under harsh conditions would develop different survival mechanisms. What looks like weakness might actually be adaptation." As if summoned by their discussion, Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice echoed through the command centers. "Communication systems. Good morning, Admiral. I was wondering when you would arrive. Your reputation precedes you." Every head in the room turned toward the speakers, but Elena's location remained a mystery. Her voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, suggesting she had gained access to the station's primary communication array. "Dr. Vasquez," Admiral Torvin replied, his tone carefully controlled. "I am Admiral Torvin of the Third Fleet. I understand you have some concerns about your accommodations." Elena's laugh carried a note of genuine amusement. "Oh, the accommodations are fine, Admiral. In fact, I have been quite comfortable exploring areas of your station that I suspect even you haven't seen. Did you know that your environmental control systems have some fascinating vulnerabilities? Nothing dangerous, of course. I wouldn't want to harm innocent personnel. But definitely educational." As if to emphasize her point, the temperature in the command center suddenly dropped 10 degrees, then rose 15 degrees above normal, then returned to standard levels all in the space of 30 seconds. "Impressive demonstration," Admiral Torvin acknowledged. "You have gained access to environmental controls. What are your demands?" "Demands?" Elena's voice carried surprise. "Admiral, you misunderstand the situation. I don't want anything from you except a conversation. A real conversation, not the interrogation theater we attempted earlier." "You are in no position to dictate terms," Warden Kethavar interjected, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Actually, Warden, I am in the perfect position to dictate terms. While you have been searching for me in the maintenance tunnels, I have been studying your station's systems. Kepler Station is an impressive piece of engineering, but it was designed by a species that thinks in terms of hierarchical control structures. Everything flows from primary command centers through secondary systems to individual components. Very logical, very efficient, and completely vulnerable to someone who understands distributed system architecture. Elena paused, and Admiral Torvin could hear the soft sound of fingers tapping on metal. She was working on something, probably in real time. "Let me tell you a story, Admiral," Elena continued. 15 years ago, I was a young lieutenant in the Alliance Engineering Corps. My unit was stationed on Kepler 442b, a mining colony that came under attack by the Void Runners. Nasty group, used to hit isolated installations and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. The lights in the command center dimmed slightly, and Admiral Torvin noticed that several non-essential systems had gone offline. Elena was demonstrating her control over the station's infrastructure while she spoke. "The Void Runners expected standard military response protocols," Elena said. "Defensive positions, distress calls, last stands. What they got instead was a young engineer who had spent her childhood taking apart every piece of technology her parents owned. I spent 3 days in the colony's maintenance systems, learning how everything connected to everything else." "The outcome?" Admiral Torvin asked, though he suspected he already knew. "The Void Runners found themselves trapped in a facility where nothing worked the way it was supposed to. Artificial gravity that turned on and off randomly. Atmospheric processors that created localized fog banks. Communication systems that broadcast opera music at maximum volume. They surrendered after 18 hours and begged to be turned over to conventional military authorities." Elena's story was interrupted by the arrival of additional security personnel. Armed Saurian guards took positions throughout the command center while technicians worked frantically to regain control of compromised systems. "I see you are bringing more friends to our conversation," Elena observed. "That's fine, I enjoy an audience. Now, where was I? Oh yes, the lesson I learned from that experience. Humans don't win by being stronger or faster or more heavily armed. We win by understanding systems better than the people who built them." Admiral Torvin gestured for his security teams to hold their positions. This human was clearly trying to make a point, and he wanted to hear it before deciding how to respond. "Admiral, your species builds things to last," Elena continued. "Solid, reliable, predictable. Every component has a specific function. Every system has clear boundaries. Every protocol has established procedures. It's beautiful in its own way. But it has a weakness. Which is, you assume that everyone else thinks the same way you do. When you captured me, you expected me to respond like a Saurian prisoner would respond. When I escaped my cell, you deployed countermeasures designed for species that approach problems with direct solutions. When I disappeared into your maintenance systems, you searched for me using patterns that would work for finding Saurian infiltrators. The station's main power grid fluctuated momentarily, and Admiral Torvin realized that Elena had just demonstrated control over systems that should have been impossible for anyone outside the engineering corps to access. "But humans think differently," Elena said. "We see connections that other species miss. We find patterns in chaos. We adapt to circumstances instead of trying to force circumstances to adapt to us. And most importantly, we improvise." "Dr. Vasquez," Admiral Torvin said carefully, "you have made your point. You are clearly more capable than our initial assessments suggested. What do you want from this demonstration?" "I want you to understand something about my species, Admiral. Something that your intelligence reports and prisoner assessments cannot convey. Humans are not individually superior to other species. We are not stronger than Saurians, not more logical than Vorthak, not more technologically advanced than most of the galactic community. But we have one advantage that has carried us from a single world to the edge of known space in less than 2 centuries. Elena paused, and Admiral Torvin found himself genuinely curious about her answer. "We refuse to accept that problems are unsolvable," she said. "When you told me that your prison was escape-proof, you were stating what you believed to be a fact. When I heard that statement, I heard a challenge. Every system can be understood. Every barrier can be overcome. Every limitation can be worked around. It's not arrogance, Admiral. It's simply how we are built." The command center's main display activated, showing a schematic of Kepler Station that was more detailed than anything in Admiral Torvin's classified files. Elena had not only mapped the entire facility, but had identified structural weaknesses, system vulnerabilities, and critical failure points that the original designers had missed. "This is our conversation, Admiral," Elena said, her voice now coming from the main speakers with perfect clarity. "You wanted to know what humans are capable of when we are properly motivated. You wanted to understand why the Alliance considers us worthy partners despite our apparent limitations. You wanted to see if we represented a threat to Saurian interests in this region of space." Admiral Torvin studied the schematics, noting the precision and completeness of Elena's analysis. In 6 hours working alone and without proper equipment, she had accomplished what should have required a team of engineers working for months. "Consider your questions answered," Elena continued. "Now I have a proposal for you. I am going to walk out of this station and you are going to let me go. Not because you cannot stop me, but because you now understand that trying to stop me would be counterproductive for both of our species." "And why would we agree to such terms, Warden?" Kethavar demanded. Elena's response came in the form of a gentle vibration throughout the station. Not violent, not threatening, but unmistakably indicating her control over fundamental structural systems. "Because, Warden, I could have brought this station down around your heads at any point in the last 3 hours. I could have vented atmosphere, overloaded power cores, or simply locked everyone in their quarters until rescue arrived. Instead, I gave you a demonstration of human capabilities without causing harm to a single individual on this station." Admiral Torvin looked around the command center, noting the faces of his personnel. Fear, confusion, and grudging respect were evident in their expressions. Elena had accomplished what no military force had ever managed. She had made the crew of Kepler Station feel vulnerable in their own stronghold. "Dr. Vasquez," Admiral Torvin said finally, "you have made your point effectively. However, you were captured while conducting unauthorized intelligence gathering in Saurian space. We cannot simply ignore the original charges." "Actually, Admiral, you can and you will," Elena replied. "Because my mission was never about intelligence gathering. I came here to make contact with your people, and this conversation is the successful completion of that mission. The Alliance is interested in establishing formal diplomatic relations with the Saurian hegemony. Consider this an unofficial first contact protocol." The silence in the command center stretched for long moments as Admiral Torvin processed this information. Everything about Elena's capture, imprisonment, and escape suddenly took on new meaning. "You allowed yourself to be captured," he said. "I arranged to be captured," Elena corrected. "Though I will admit, your people were more thorough than I expected. I spent several uncomfortable hours wondering if I had miscalculated the situation." Admiral Torvin made a decision that would have consequences far beyond Kepler Station. "Dr. Vasquez, you are free to leave. However, I would like to extend an invitation for you to remain as our guest while we arrange formal diplomatic contact with Alliance representatives." Elena's voice carried genuine warmth when she replied, "I would be honored, Admiral, and I promise that any future accommodations will be far less dramatic than this introduction." As if summoned by her words, the blast doors to the command center opened, and Dr. Elena Vasquez walked in wearing a maintenance technician's environment suit that she had somehow modified to fit her human physiology. She looked tired but unharmed, and her smile carried the satisfaction of a puzzle successfully solved. "Gentlemen," she said, removing the suit's helmet, "thank you for the most educational 79 hours of my career. I think this is the beginning of a very interesting relationship between our species." Admiral Torvin looked at the small human standing confidently in the middle of his command center and realized that the galaxy had just become a much more interesting place.